What's up? My name's Adam and I'm an artist out of northern Wisconsin. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the differences between volts, amps, and hertz and how they all apply in tattooing. In tattooing, you might think that it's a pretty straightforward answer and that this video might be irrelevant to you, but that's absolutely not true. These three subjects are a part of the advanced knowledge of understanding your tattoo machine. Volts, amps, and hertz are all three different subjects, and understanding them could change the outcome of your tattoos. Now, this is a disclaimer. I'm in no way a master electrician. I've maybe wired one outlet in my house and maybe like 3 light bulbs or something like that. So I might not get all the specifics correct in this video, but I'm going to try to explain it to you guys the best how I like to think of it when applied to tattooing. Let's start off with talking about volts. A lot of people like to think about voltage in tattooing as the speed that your tattoo machine is going. And that is somewhat correct, but not necessarily technically correct. Let's just think of it like this. Voltage measures the force or potential energy that can be delivered through a certain power source. But what does that mean? Most homes have power outlets that are on 120 volt systems. That means there's 120 volts at that power outlet available for you to draw from. When you have a device plugged into that power outlet and you're drawing power from it, that is called amps. You are drawing amps. When you plug into one of those outlets to charge your device, like a cell phone or a tattoo machine, that only uses a fraction of that amp, and that is called a milliamp. And when you charge your devices, it probably only takes a few thousand milliamps to charge. Make sure you're following along. Most houses that are on a 120 volt system use 15 and 20 amp breakers that are connected to those outlets. If you end up plugging in a really big object like a power tool or a bunch of little objects that are pulling more than what that breaker is set for, more than 20 amps, if you got like a tool that takes 25 amps or something, that's how you overload the breaker and you trip the breaker, and then, you know, in the breaker panel box, you know, all your switches flip and stuff. That's because you pulled too much amps, so it did the auto shut off on you. So once again, voltage measures the potential force going to that power source, like the outlet. And then amperage measures the flow of electricity coming from that power source to your device. Now let's talk about that more and how it applies to us in tattooing. As tattoo artists, we don't need a full 120 volts to run our tattoo machines. So that is why us tattoo artists, we will use a power supply, or we will use a battery, so we can regulate the amount of electricity that our tattoo machines can draw from. The problem in tattooing is that the more you dial down the volts, also the amperage lowers, so you don't have the strength of all those amps with your tattoo machine when you dial down the volts. Which brings me now to talking about amps and why they're so important in tattooing and how they can make a difference in your tattoos. In most cases, when your tattoo machine isn't under any load, where there's no needle in it and it's not on the skin or anything, just to turn it on like this, it's going to take less than 1 amp. There's literally almost no electricity at all just to make the needle go, just to make the motor spin. It's like literally almost no electricity. It's in the milliamps. Where all that starts to change is when you put friction onto the motor. In tattooing, putting friction on the motor would be as simple as putting a cartridge inside the machine or putting a needle to the skin. Something that would also put more friction on the motor is thicker inks. And when your inks also are drying inside your cartridge and onto your needle and stuff, and your machine has to work harder to make that needle move. All those things that are going to cause friction to the motor and inconsistencies is going to make your tattoo machine work harder to be more consistent. So what it's going to have to do is use more amperage. So more friction on the motor equals more amperages being used. I'm not supposed to have caffeine. And for my example, to make this easier to understand, I actually have this pretty awesome product here. This is called the Musotoku Rover R1 battery. The reason why this battery is so cool is because when I turn it on, you'll see a little power bar at the bottom, and it will tell us how much load is on the motor of the tattoo machine. In return, the more load that's on your tattoo machine, the farther the power bar on this battery is gonna go. In return, the farther the power bar goes across the screen, the more amperage your tattoo machine is pulling from the battery, So right there, the machine's not on, so the power bar isn't moving. We turn the machine on by pressing the red button. Boom, right there. So now the machine is drawing 3 little bars of power. It's really hard to see, I know, guys, it's blurry. And then when we put a cartridge in it, we will see that it is drawing a little bit more. I believe that is drawing about 4 to 5 little bars of power, which means that it is drawing more amperage now as the needle is in it. And then obviously when you turn your power supply up, right there, you see the power bar going up, means that it's drawing more amps to make your machine run faster. Now, while the tattoo machine is on, and if I just slow down the needle, I'm not going to put it to my skin, but I'm going to hold down this part right here, you'll see the power bar go up, which means that it's drawing more power when your needle is touching skin. Once again, I'm just holding the needle right here, and then you can see the power bar going up, which means that it draws more amps because your tattoo machine is trying to stay at that consistent speed, so it has to pull more power once it's under friction. Now, amps in the tattoo industry has become somewhat controversial, and some of you guys probably skipped the whole beginning of the video just to come to this part to hear me say this. Not all power supplies and batteries have the same maximum level of amps. A cheap Amazon power supply like this one, this is some knockoff power supply for like $100 on Amazon. These cheaper power supplies could only draw up to about 1 to 3 amps maximum, compared to a higher quality power supply, kind of like a Critical, a Musatoku, or a Cheyenne power supply, where they can draw up to 5 amps of power. And what happens when you exceed that amount of amperage, your tattoo machine becomes very inconsistent. And I don't know how else to say it, but all these batteries on the market right now only go up to 2 amps, and these are the highest quality batteries. This is a $400 battery, this is a $400 battery. They only go up to 2 amps of power, because if it goes up any higher, your battery will literally die like in less than an hour. This does not exclude any types of style of tattooing. If you exceed the amperage on your power supply or battery, your power source, then your tattoo machine is going to start to bog down and be less consistent. This is why a lot more of the old school tattoo artists that have been using wired power supplies for a long time, they're having a hard time making the switch over to pen style tattoo machines. A lot of these artists are not realizing why they're having this difficulty with the wireless pen style machines. They feel like they are very soft and inconsistent. It's because they are used to having 5 amps on a wired system, and then they'll always say that it's the coil machine that hits hard. It's not the coil. It's not the coil machine. It's the power supply supplying to the machine. Here on the screen, I'm gonna throw up an image of where you guys can see the comparison between 2 continuous amps and 5 continuous amps. Obviously, this is some stipple work, and on the very, very top one where you see the 2 continuous amps, this one is a little more smudged. That is because the tattoo machine is reaching its max amps, and then it's starting to bog down, creating more of a scratch texture compared to a stipple texture. And then for the 5 continuous amps on the bottom, you'll see it has a more defined texture. That's because the machine is not struggling to do that texture. It's not bogging down with the friction of the skin or anything. It has the full 5 amps available to it, allowing it not to bog down, allowing for a lot cleaner, more defined stipples on this tattoo. Both of the spots on this tattoo were done with the exact same tattoo machine, just different power supplies. This tattoo was done by Fireside Tattoos on YouTube. You guys can go over there and check them out. Obviously, a lot of it is technique and getting used to working with the equipment that you got. The newer artists that have never used a 5 amp power supply will think that all the old timers are crazy, and all the old timers are gonna think that the new kids coming up are using these really weak, shitty tattoo machines. I realized I could have made a video on this all in itself, just old timers and new timers, but it's just important to know that when you're using a battery power supply, that you do not put too much stress on the motor exceeding the 2 amps that the power supply is giving you. The way that the tattoo industry is trying to solve that problem is that they're making different stroke lengths, like longer lengths, so your tattoo machine actually hits harder. And then they're also making the motors a lot stronger to try to make up for that of only having 2 amps on the battery. Another thing the industry is doing to combat that is that the older machines, like right here, I got an old rotary pen. When you turn it on, you'll see the power bar it takes a lot of amps just to run this machine at 5 volts. Like, what? That's crazy. Compared to the newer machines, you know, they have refined the motors a lot more. And now when I turn this on, you'll see it takes hardly any amps to run this tattoo machine. The more efficient that these newer tattoo machines become will allow us to have more amperage to our disposal, having more consistent tattoo machines. If you're watching this and you haven't looked down in the comments yet, go look down in the comments, because I'm sure there's like 2, 3, maybe even 6 people arguing with me on this subject right now. It's a hot topic. My personal opinion is that 2 amps is perfectly fine if you have a high quality tattoo machine. Obviously, stippling would still be better with a 5 amp system. I suggest if you guys are a stipple only or line work and stipple only artist, maybe get yourself a nice efficient tattoo machine, but then run it on wired still with 5 amps. Hopefully I described all that good. Now let's move on to Hertz and what that means for us in tattooing. Hertz is well known to be your frequency, or as some people would call it, your refresh rate. If any of you guys are like big time gamers, like a PC gamer, and you buy yourself a monitor, you'll see some monitors are 60 Hertz, some monitors are like 144 Hertz. That is the refresh rate of your monitor. So if you're playing a video game or something and you're getting like 60 FPS, you gotta have a 60 Hertz monitor to be able to capture all those frames. Well, how that kind of applies to tattooing is that when you have Hertz in tattooing, that is the frequency of your needle. 1 Hertz is your needle going out of the cartridge 1 time per second. So if you are running a tattoo machine at 300 Hertz, your tattoo machine is going pretty fast, but your tattoo machine is going out 300 times per second from the outside to the inside of the cartridge. Now, why would we want a Hertz readout on our tattoo machine compared to having a voltage readout? Well, that's simply because all tattoo machines, all brands and everything, they use different motors on the inside of their machines using a different amount of amps. See, we learned about amps, using a different level of amps pulling from those voltages, making the machine run at different speeds at different volts. I can tell you right now, guys, this tattoo machine at 5 volts is way different than this tattoo machine at 5 volts. This one at 5 volts, let's see how much this runs. This actually says the Hertz. Let's put it down to 5 volts. Or here's 4 volts. Let's put this down to 5 volts. It says 83 Hertz. So this would be making the needle go out 83 times per second. When this one is down at 5 volts, it goes down to, I believe, 24 Hertz. So both of them at the same volts are different. So anyone that tells you, hey man, I'm running my tattoo machine around 8 volts, don't listen to them. Unless you have the same tattoo machine, don't listen to them, because their tattoo machine is configured completely differently on the inside and it's using a different motor. In the end, having a tattoo machine that actually shows you the Hertz on it is way more superior when you're trying to compare it to another tattoo machine and you're trying to compare the needle speed. A lot of high quality newer tattoo machines are starting to include the Hertz on it, and then also on some of the high quality power supplies like the wired ones, they also include the Hertz on them. And then you have companies like Cheyenne that just thinks that having no display on their tattoo machines is okay, which is crazy to me. I think you should at least have some kind of indication to know how fast your tattoo machine's going. And everyone that's been asking me a lot on Instagram and everything, I am getting the Akis M1 tattoo machine. They're actually going to send me a review copy, and that tattoo machine actually has no voltage on it. It only has a Hertz display. It's because they understand the future, and the future is having a display that actually tells you your real speed of your needle. I don't know why people argue that with me, saying voltage is fine to have. It's not fine when you compare it to other tattoo machines, where I clearly compare tattoo machines to each other every single day. I gotta make sure I cover my butt on this one, because I know there's gonna be a comment down below where someone says, hey man, the Hertz display on tattoo machines isn't completely accurate. And you're not wrong, because these are pre-programmed. They are not like live feeding Hertz. Like, they don't just know it every second. Like, there's not a cycle reading the actual times it is protruding out of the cartridge, because it's all pre-programmed. So here at 5 volts at 83 Hertz, if I hold this down, the Hertz on it does not go down. Even when I'm exceeding more than 2 amps of pressure on it and on the motor, the Hertz is not going lower, even though I can clearly see and feel that the needle is going slower. It would be really cool if tattoo machines could do the live Hertz on it, so when you're putting pressure on something, you can see your Hertz go down if you exceed the amount of amps on the motor or whatever, and it starts to bog down. But most people aren't staring at the battery while they tattoo. This is something that I would probably prefer, but the average consumer wouldn't really care, because you're going to be focusing on your tattoo. You're not going to be focusing on the display showing you the hertz. And also because if you have live fed hertz, it would probably take a lot more battery power. So that's probably why they don't do it. But I mean, I think it would be cool. What every tattoo machine should definitely have is a power bar like the Musatoku battery. That is cool. The review on these batteries might be up on my YouTube channel, so go check them out. Take her easy and keep her sleazy. Peace out.